Alright, let's dive straight in. But before we do, tap that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next political showdown we bring you here on UK Now. Trust me, you'll want to stay with me for this one. So picture the scene in the comments. An MP stands up, voice steady but firm, and throws down a question that lands like a thunderclap. He says it's a shame the government had to be dragged kicking and screaming into finally granting an inquiry into the Pakistani grooming gang scandal. Now, he admits the inquiry is welcome, but here's the catch. No chair appointed, no terms of reference set, and no timeline in sight. Basically, an inquiry that exists in name only. Then comes the gut punch. He asks the minister, what about the victims right now? What about the cases where police officers, council staff, or social workers actively covered things up? Shouldn't those people be dealt with immediately rather than waiting years for some report to gather dust? And what about those already convicted? Shouldn't they serve out their full sentences instead of being quietly released early like the notorious Oxford Six? Now pause for a second, because that's a question you and I both know cuts right to the bone. If you were sat in that chamber, wouldn't you want a clear, sharp answer? The minister's reply, however, is far more cautious. He insists the government wants to get this inquiry right, that it will be time-sensitive, supposedly around 2 to 3 years. He even throws in a reminder. The child sex abuse inquiry took 2 years just to find a chair, with 3 failed attempts along the way, and he's keen to stress they don't want to repeat that fiasco. So, in other words, be patient. But here's the thing. Patience is the one thing victims and their families simply don't have left. Every delay feels like another betrayal, another reminder that justice in Britain often moves slower than a snail uphill in winter. And let's be honest here. When the MP asked whether officials who covered up abuse would be held accountable, you could almost hear the silence in the room. Because deep down, everyone knows that's the real test. Not inquiries, not reports, not grand statements, accountability. So let me ask you, do you trust that this inquiry will deliver the justice victims have been waiting for, or do you think it's just another way of kicking the can down the road? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think.